I call to order this April 24th, 2023 study session, and it is 6 p.m. Our first item on the agenda, first of all council members are present today. So our first is East Pierce and Fire and Rescue Annual Update. I call on John Parkinson.
All right, thank you, council. I'll get my presentation up here. We have 1 hour until the Kraken start. I'll be through before that. All right, we're working. Well, so I have about 10-15 minutes to get through my presentation. As I go through this, if there's anything that you want to interrupt me on, please feel free to do so, or throw all the questions you want at the end. So moving forward, I know most of you are familiar with East Pierce Fire and Rescue, but just giving you a reminder of who we are and what we cover. So on the map that you see on your screen, that covers the cities of Milton, Edgewood, Sumner, Bonnie Lake, completely encircle Lake, Taps, Prairie Ridge, Tahale. We provide service to South Prairie by contract. We completely encircle Wilkeson and Carbonado and butt up to the town of Buckley. And then we go all the way down south and out east to the Mowich entrance to the national park. So in all, a little over 100,000 population, 153 square miles. In 2022, we ran 12,653 incidents. We generally send more than one unit on responses. So that puts us just under 30,000 unit responses, or the amount of times that emergency vehicles were on the road going to incidents. As far as governance go, just like you, we have an elected body. So we have 7 fire commissioners. They're elected to 6-year terms. And just like you, they set district policy and adopt budget. As far as what our staffing looks like, so in 2023, meaning the year that we're moving into now, we have 183 budget authorized positions. By the end of the year, that'll be staffing 7 fire stations with 6 engine companies, a ladder truck, 4 medic units, a battalion chief, and a new medical services officer that I'll speak a little bit more about later. And then by the end of the year, we'll be at 31 personnel on duty, 24/7, 365. As far as what our finances look like, so what you're looking at is the 2023 revenue budget. So just under $44 million. We are our own taxing district, so no money comes from the state or the county. So the majority of our funding is through local property taxes. You'll see just over 80% there. Just under 15% of our revenue comes in from medical transport. Then we've got about 4% that comes in from a SAFER grant. I'll talk about that. And then what's left is about 1/4% in just miscellaneous revenues. As far as expenditures go, we break out into 5 core areas of our operation. The operations division being the largest at just over 68%. Fire prevention at 3%, logistics just under 12%. They primarily focus on facilities and fleet. Our EMS division just under 7%, and then administration at just under 7%. And so that's me, HR, our finance team, and our IT personnel. As far as equipment, what you see up there, that's new for us. So that's dedicated funding that gets allocated each year into reserves to pay for equipment in the future. So we're not going back out to bond for equipment years from now. Speaking of bonds, so back in November 2018, voters approved an $80 million capital facilities bond. It paid for the funding of the replacement of 4 stations, plus building a new station out in Tahale, plus some additional frontline equipment, which has all been replaced now. That includes your ladder truck and new medic unit out of Sumner. What you see up on the screen there in the upper right or upper left, depending on which way you're looking at that, is station 118. So that's Edgewood station that is near completion. We expect substantial completion mid next month and to be running units out of it in June. Its sister facility, it will look exactly like that, only completely in reverse, is going to be the Tahale station. Underneath that, you'll see our headquarters station. So that's Bonnie Lake, station 111. If you drive by there, the bulk of the foundation work is complete now. And so they're getting pretty close to start framing on that project. So we sold $40 million of that bond, those bonds back in 2018. And then if you recall what interest rates were doing earlier in 2022, they were just great and they were the lowest they'd ever been. We noticed that they started to creep up. The original plan would have been to sell the second half of those bonds in December of 2022. Rather than wait for rates to continue to creep up, we went ahead and sold those back in July. So the good news was we were still able to capture really historic low interest rates. In doing so, that allowed us to cut 4 years off the repayment term. So the net impact across all taxpayers would be a savings of over $14 million. As far as property tax, so what our homeowners are paying right now, myself included in this story. So currently just over $1.50 per thousand. So that breakout, the regular levy, we also refer to that as our fire levy, is currently at $1.08. The EMS levy just over 23 cents, and then that bond is coming in just over 18 cents. It was originally marketed at no more than 25 cents per thousand. So we're performing pretty well there. As far as our core documents that guide the organization, I'll point to this one. I spoke about this last year because it was we had just adopted it the year prior. So strategic plan focuses on 4 key areas. It was adopted for 5-year planning window of 2021 through 25. It focuses on those 4 key areas that you see on the presentation screen. Pleased to report that we're moving through the plan at a high rate of speed and expect to complete it in 2024, a year early. So I expect to be adopting a new one in 2024 that I'll report out to either at the tail end of 24 and early 25 to all of you. Next document was just completed and adopted in 2023, which is our standard of cover. So it takes a look at a couple things. Starts off by identifying the risks that exist within the community. So if you think of Sumner is a really good example where we have an industrial area that carries a very significant level of risk, then does a residential area or a multifamily structure. So it takes a look at that across the entire district, and then takes a look at how we currently deploy units, and then develops a target for how we should be deploying our units. From there, the board was able to adopt a number of goals that we start working on in the years to come. Last document that I'll point to is our capital facilities plan. That's what we point back to for where we're spending that $80 million in bond fund. The 5 stations are listed across the top. That's 118 in Edgewood, 111 in Bonnie Lake, 114 on the west side of Lake Tapps, which is in the last couple weeks of its existence before it is torn down. Station 112 in Prairie Ridge, and then Station 117, which will be a new facility out in Tahale. The facilities that are listed underneath there are either in phase 2 or in an unphased phase, meaning they don't have a number assigned to them. Those are unfunded projects that we're trying to work on in the next few years of developing a funding mechanism. So getting more specific into what happened in the city of Sumner in 2022. So total incident count, 2,391 incidents. Just like the rest of the district, overwhelming majority of those are medical in nature. So over 3/4 of the incidents were medical. Just over 8% false. That's generally something like a false fire alarm, often seen in our commercial buildings. Service-related calls, so non-emergent in nature, and then 2% of incidents being fire. So you'll also see underneath that 5,342 unit responses. So again, that's how many vehicles were coming into the city proper. Travel times, which is the amount of time from the minute we put the vehicle in drive until the minute we hit the parking brake in front of the residence or the structure. So at the 90th percentile, or 90% of the time, we'll be there in 8 minutes and 37 seconds or faster, and then on average at 5:35. The couple of graphs that are on there just show a couple things. One is hour of the day, and then day of the week counts. What you see as far as hour of the day is pretty normal. 2/3 of our incidents happen between 8 in the morning and 8 in the evening. So while people are awake, and then 1/3 of our incidents happen overnight, and your city follows the trend almost perfect compared to what we see across the rest of the district. And then as far as day of the week count, generally our weekends are a little bit slower. To explain why that would be. So again, 3/4 of our incidents are medical. People tend to tough it out over the weekend. Either because they don't have access potentially to a primary care provider, or they just think they'll get better. But by the time you start to hit Monday and Tuesday, then that suddenly changes and we see an uptick in medical calls. So 2022 highlights, and this is the short list, I promise you. So I'll zip through this really quick. Starting off with SAFER grant. So that's a federally funded grant through FEMA, Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response. We received a 3-year grant from FEMA for $5.2 million to hire 12 personnel. That's targeted at staffing the Tahali station. Just as a reminder, anytime we add staffing anywhere in our system, that has a downstream impact into Sumner. So right now, when we have a call into Holly, which from what I understand, I don't know if this is a pride thing or not, they have surpassed Sumner in population. And because of that, we're starting to see an uptick in incident volume out there. But as they get a call for a medic unit, potentially that medic unit comes out of Bonnie Lake. That's our busiest medic unit in the system. And now the next up unit takes the medic unit out of Sumner, and so on and so on. The same thing happens as we see any type of fire call up in Bonnie Lake or out into Holly. So as we add that staffing out in that area, it does have an impact of keeping your unit in town more often. I already spoke about the bond sale and savings on that to taxpayers. We graduated 2 classes of recruits, so 10 personnel total. Adopted our 2023 budget back in November. Pleased to report that came in at a 2.1% year-over-year increase to taxpayers. We completed 2 audit years just because during COVID, the state auditor gave us they said it was a free pass on 1 year, though we found out that doing 2 years of auditing wasn't as much fun as we thought. So, but we did end up with clean audits on both fiscal years. We established an equipment replacement reserve, which I spoke about earlier, that now we set aside money each year so that in the future, we don't have to go back to bond to buy equipment. Kicked off DEI training for all of our supervisors. We formed Pierce County Fire Training Consortium, which I'll speak about on the next slide. Had 3 battalion chiefs graduate the Executive Leadership Academy from the UW Foster School of Business. We deployed a behavioral health specialist. So in the past, you might have heard me talk about our community paramedic, who's a person who's focused on low acuity calls. So this is adding another person into that same system that's a social worker. And so the 2 of them team up to work on some of our chronic abusers of 911 or chronic users of 911. Sent 5 employees through medic school. We participated along with you all in the regional AHAR drill last year. Completed life safety inspections of over 25 million square feet of commercial business space. And this was actually the first full year now that we were able to complete all of our community events in person. So really the last one that was kind of lagging behind was the pancake feed. So we had that back here in the fall. But our Easter egg hunts just wrapped up, Santa runs, Big Give, Coats for Kids, all of those. And then this week we're doing what I can refer to as the clown show, but the laugh squad that goes into the elementary school. So we were not allowed in the schools for the last few years. So all of our public education and public relation events are back in full swing. As far as fire stations go, I spoke about a couple of those, but we finished acquiring all the land. So our last piece of land that we had to buy was in Prairie Ridge. Station 111 in Bonnie Lake broke ground, and Station 114 on the West Lake Taps was out to bid last year. As far as equipment, we put a new boat in service on Lake Taps. The prior one was something like 30 years old and kind of leaned to one side as we tootled around the water. So brand new fireboat out on Lake Taps. We received 3 new medic units. One of those is in service here in town, and ordered 3 additional medic units on top of those new medic units, as well as 2 new engines. And I just point that out because our turnaround time now on getting equipment has really gotten very extensive or lengthy. And I'm sure you've seen the same thing in staff vehicles in the city here, but a medic unit, we are still, if we're lucky enough to be able to get our hands on them, we can get them in about a year if you can get the chassis or the truck that they sit on. But as far as what we see, Chevy and Ford have shut down their lines. They can make more money selling to consumers than they can to government. So they tend to push that way. That leaves us, we've been able to latch into Dodge chassis, but so that's made things difficult. A fire engine is a completely custom built vehicle. Historically used to take a year to build. Right now, we ordered 2 last fall, and we decided to go ahead and order 2 more last week. They will show up in 2026. So yeah, and so that's why we ordered those 2 additional last week, was just they were 2026 replacements, but to get them by then, we need to order them now. So it's unfortunate. As far as where we're headed in 2023, so more hiring. I talked about the recruit class for the SAFER grant. They started their academy in February. They'll hit the streets later this fall. Reminder, that's 100% federally funded for 3 years. We've got another class of recruits that says 10 employees. Right now we're up to 12 employees because of some last minute retirements, but that recruitment is underway right now. Big organizational pushes. We wrapped up the standard of cover, which is the first one on there. That now triggers a deployment overhaul. So we start working with South Sound 911 to reconfigure how our units are being dispatched. I mentioned opening Station 118 in Edgewood, so that'll occur hopefully in June. Expect to staff Station 124 in Milton. So similar effect as adding staffing in Tahale, adding staffing in Milton. Hopefully keeps your unit out of Edgewood and Milton as much. So the ladder truck does spend quite a bit of time going up into that area. So having a second fire engine up in that community will keep your ladder truck in town more often. Medical supervisor or MSO. So we have a battalion chief who currently oversees each shift. And so this is a new unit who supervises medical personnel. They're currently running out of the Bonnie Lake station, and then once the Edgewood station opens, they'll move over there. So they are currently staffed when available, but then they'll be moving to 24/7, 365 staffing in the next couple months. And then last item on there is the formation of the Pierce County Fire Training Consortium. So late last year, the 5 agencies that you see listed, Graham, Central Pierce, West Pierce, Ording, and East Pierce, all took our training divisions because we said we're all doing the exact same thing. And so why not combine them into one building and have them work together? So now there's about a staff of just over 20 people who deliver training to 760 firefighters out of Central Pierce Station 60. So that's exciting to see taking off. Things that you're used to seeing from us and how to keep up on what's going on. We send out our quarterly newsletter. We also have a completely brand new website. Active on social media, just like everybody else. So Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you guys are using code RED, correct? So that's thank you for having that. It's been a big help. I know I accessed it with Jason, gosh, when was, I don't know, 6 months ago, and we had the odor and natural gas kind of at the north end. The other item to use there is Pulse Point. Anybody can download that onto their phone and keep track of what incidents were going on. It doesn't tell specifics on address, but if you hear a siren near your house and you open the app, it'll tell you what kind of incident it is. And that is my quick version. If I can answer any questions for you.
All right. Do we have any questions? Councilmember Potato.
So you said part of your income is from transport,
Yes.
and does that include Sumner residents?
So what that means, so that's revenue that's being brought in through insurance. So for any district resident, if we transport you, we'll bill your insurance. Whatever we collect from insurance is what we collect. Anything that's not paid is written off against the EMS levy. For folks who live out of district, then we do end up going to collect after insurance pays. That's a pretty small amount of people, but again, no difference than in the past for district residents. You won't ever receive a bill from us.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody online? Nope.
Well,
Yes.
shoot. All right. Well, you have a copy of,
We,
oh,
we have one right.
All
here,
right.
Mr. Stewart.
Good job, Chief. Thank you
Yep.
very much for
Yep.
this. And I'm impressed that you did it all without notes, except you just looked at yourself. So very, very good. I'm an old finance guy. I just want to understand that you don't get anything. You don't bill the city of Sumner for anything. It's all bonds and levies and all that. stuff.
in the miscellaneous, the revenue that we bring in from the city of Sumner directly is related to fire investigation. I believe it's 7,500 a year. Yeah, somewhere right in there.
Okay, great. No, excellent job. I really
Yep.
am excited to have such a well-run organization.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, and you always know where to find me.
Yeah, go Kraken, right? Okay, so we will move on. Next, we have the YMCA annual update.
Are you both saying? Thank you, Mayor. As they get settled, this is our annual update from the YMCA. They'll be covering their activity in the community as well as how they are delivering on the services that are listed in our 2 service agreements. One from 2013, the other one from 2019. So we have CEO Charlie Davis and Executive Director for the Sumner branch,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Jenna Lehman with us.
Well,
go ahead.
thank you. Thank you for having us.
I'm sorry, can you push that one? There you go.
All right, there we go. Thanks for having us. And first of all, thank you for bringing the Y to Sumner. I know many of you were part of that heavy lift and it's been a huge benefit to our community. So I want to give you a quick update about what's happening at the Y and then talk specifically towards what's happening with the services agreement, both the original and the addition. So up on your screen, you'll see our membership growth starting back in 22 of January and to the end of March. We have seen phenomenal growth over the past 6 months to year and a half. Real steady growth coming the first of this year. So September was our first kind of back to everything. Masks came off in March of last year, and we saw some really strong membership growth. What I'd really like to highlight is that total monthly usage. I don't know if you can see how we go from 35,000 in December to 57. We got some growing pains. We're busy though, and it's great. It's great to see the community back in the Y and folks using the Y. With membership growth comes the need for more members to be on scholarship or financial assistance. So providing that to anybody who qualifies, and if they don't qualify, we do look for a workaround, have that conversation with them and get to yes is what our goal always is. So some programs that are happening at the Y, we're really proud of our active older adult program. As I mentioned when I was here in the summer, those are our senior citizens. They're the first folks that came back to the Y. They needed a place to belong. They needed community to be a part of. And so we've really expanded our programs for them. We have a knitting group who comes in twice a week to work on the current projects. Hats, blankets, doll dresses were happening the other day. So just, fellowship, but also different activities. They work on hats to send over to the food banks and Lions House for Kids as well. Coffee chat is also happening. So that's a group of folks who gather after their exercise class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Coffee, chat, hang out, talk about how great their class was. And then we've started a healthy aging community cafe. And so this is an opportunity once a week for folks to come in and learn about healthy aging. So this week we'll have an audiologist coming in to talk about hearing health and services that are available to them at no cost. This is something that's open to the community. We're inviting local community members to come in and chat with them about what resources are available. We'll have people coming in starting midsummer to talk about insurance options. So many options out there, need advice on what to move forward with. And then of course, just keeping our folks active. We're seeing about 1,300 participants a week in either group exercise and or water aerobics. If you want to come to my water aerobics class, it's Mondays, 9 a.m. I want you there. Come see me. And then community support, continuing to support our refugees who find Sumner Bonnie Lake home and giving them membership passes, getting them connected to their community so that they feel welcome and included. Continuing to do our Sumner quarterly guest passes. Just met with Carmen the other day. We're going to get those back in the newsletter, and then maybe some utility bills that Jason and I have talked about. And then, as you might imagine, people like to leave their precious belongings behind at the Y, like towels, coats, and all the other good stuff. So working with Lions House for Kids to donate that stuff up to them and get it back out into the community to those who need us the most. And then serving as a cooling center during the summer. We had some hot weather last year, worked with Carmen to get it out on city Facebook pages to let folks know they can come spend the day or the weekend at the Y at no cost to stay safe and stay cool during the heat. And here's some programs at the Y. So these are programs that are part of the membership base. We have grown quite a bit in the last 8 to 9 months, highlighting swim lessons, of course. We live around a lot of water. Our kids need to know how to be safe in the water. And so really have had a push to grow our swim lessons and to serve those kids, seeing really good progression in levels and getting strong swimmers. May will be hosting Water Safety Month. So a lot of information on social media and happening in the branch just about how we as adults in kids' lives can take responsibility to keep them safe and how kids can take responsibility to keep them safe. And then another program that we're really proud of is our homeschool PE program. We know we have a homeschool population in this area that needs a place to be. And so we are serving them in PE classes once or twice a week, depending on their need, and also a place for them to belong. So we're busy. We love being busy, and programs are, if we can get folks connected to programs, we know that they'll stay with the Y longer and be more committed to their wellness. So just a quick look ahead, April 29th, Healthy Kids Day. It's all about kids being healthy, open to the public, lots of activities, a little run. We'll have the old cannery train there. We'll have some council members there serving on our Y council as well. And then we head into May, which is a big time for us. We have our weight room expansion, bringing in additional weight equipment. Strength training is very big these days. Folks need to be strong to stay healthy. And so we are expanding our weight room and bringing in state-of-the-art equipment. Would love to give anyone a tour starting May 11th if you want to stop by and see the investment that the Y leadership has made in our center to focus on strength and accessibility. One of the things I'm most proud of that we have done is making adaptive equipment accessible. So we will have machines that a chair rotates out so you can slide in if you're in a wheelchair. Also adjustable pulleys. So depending on your diverse ability, you'll be able to use the equipment. And that's not something we had before and easily before. So we're really proud of that. May 1, we start our dementia support group in support and partnership with Memory Haven. It's open to the public. It's a group designed for caregivers with folks with dementia and how can they come together and have an area to talk about what it's like to have family going through dementia. National Day of Prayer, May 4th, we'll have all kinds of activities for all different walks of faith, but really focusing on that spiritual part of the Y and celebrating National Day of Prayer. Our dancers are dancing in Bonnie Lake, 313 of them, lots of glitter, lots of tutus, sparkly things, all the stuff. So we're really proud of that. School district has been amazing to work with and helping us get the Performing Arts Center secured and working together. And then summer day camp, all the kids come into the Y to spend summer at the Y. We're excited to focus on water safety with that group, small group activities, and then an incredible partnership with the library to focus on summer reading loss or summer. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Kids not forgetting how to read in the summer. We're going to focus on that. So got a really, really great partnership working with them to really focus on that part. So we're excited. All right, let's talk about this services agreement. So first is the original agreement that we created for the land that the Y currently sits on. We had the community access, which was the quarterly passes, have continued to run those. They're tougher to get out to let folks know that we have them, but we have done 304 of just quarterly passes. The tricky part is that if they become a member, we lose the tracking of the quarterly pass because they transfer over to the membership. But 304 over the past 8-ish years, again, with a strong push to work with Carmen and her team to get more info out there. Teen Late Night, over 8,500 youth served. We had taken a break from Teen Late Night, but it will be coming back in the fall, likely to be renamed to something different, but with a focus on a safe place for kids to be, safe activities for kids to have, and a place for our teens to belong and feel welcome. We're seeing a lot of teens in our Y right now. They like to be on the basketball court and in the weight room. And so how do we get those who maybe don't find themselves in one of those two places? So more information to come on specific hours and what that looks like, but we're excited to bring it back and know there's a big need for it. Financial assistance over the course of this services agreement has averaged about 10.7%. We are seeing a higher average financial assistance since coming back from COVID, and want to continue to be able to serve those families. Program financial assistance continues to be available to all members for any classes that come with an additional fee. Charlie has really been instrumental in helping us look at what can we offer without an additional fee. We know they're already paying a membership. Let's make these programs as accessible as humanly possible. And so we have really eliminated those additional fees, except for visual arts and culinary, that just the supplies cost a little bit more, but continued commitment to providing financial assistance to that. We still have meeting rooms available for folks in the city to use. Right now, we've been supporting the library planning groups as well as the Sumner Rotary Leadership on a monthly basis. And so if you ever need a place to meet, give me a call. I got some rooms available for you. And we'll even make it work on a less than ideal situation. So annual swim lessons, this has been a tricky one for us. We have served through a 21st Century grant that we had prior to COVID. This is tricky, and as we continue to work with the school district and just how do they have space in their day to get kiddos to us? So continuing to work with Jason on how this can look or could look, but we're seeing, again, about 1,600 kids a month on swim lessons. If somebody can't afford the Y, they can go on to a family voucher. So we're getting them in the door and we're making it accessible. We continue to have rental rates for community members, specifically those in the city of Sumner. Not as popular, but it's still available. Day use guest fees, we continue to have those available. We now offer a family one, which is much more affordable. So you and your 7 grandkids and 3 grown adults can all come to the Y for a better fee than what we used to have. Continue to support the Parks and Rec program and be respectful of spaces and places that they're running their program, and continued communication with them. And then continued art space. We're so proud of our art space. We have the biggest arts program in the association with dance and then visual and culinary arts. So restarting our partnership with the school district on how we can support their programming at the school, and that we can display art in the center as well. And then have our arts director, Michelle, serving on the Arts Commission. Any questions on this one before I add to it? Okay.
I think we're good.
All right, here comes the next one. So this is the additional services agreement for the field space that sits just to the side of the Y. And this agreement was edited last summer as we navigated COVID. And so we continue to have the 3-month family membership vouchers. So low income families can come to the Y, get set up on 3 months. That gives them about 2 sessions to participate in programming and get them involved. And then at the end of the 3 months, we have a conversation with them, see where they're at. If they're able to then apply for financial assistance or scholarship, we'll get them on the scholarship, or we may continue their 3-month voucher depending on the situation. When I gave this PowerPoint to Jason, we had 68 vouchers this year, but now we're up to 88 vouchers just in the last week and a half. So added a few bigger families recently, and then served with 88 vouchers the year prior. What is interesting and tricky in this is families come in all different sizes. And so we had 88 vouchers, but that's 248 people. So just continuing to navigate it. But this is one of the cooler parts of our membership staff's job is someone to come in and say, gosh, moved into Sumner, can't get started, but can't afford the Y. What are our options? And for us to say, hey, with an amazing partnership with the city of Sumner, we're able to say, come be part of our Y for 3 months. Let's get you connected. Let's serve you. So continuing to track really well on those. Our 3-month senior membership vouchers have been a bit trickier. What we're finding is insurance is paying for them. So we're handing them out, and then they're discovering that their insurance benefit will actually pay for their membership at the Y. So we worked with our advisory council last week. We have some ideas on some new places to get them. Also, how do we help in getting our seniors to the Y? Because transportation could be an issue. So we have some great ideas, and we'll keep pushing the senior membership vouchers. Ida, we also connected with her to let her know / remember that she too can be giving the senior membership vouchers out at the family center. So we're continue to serve there. Shower program, we have 39 people being served year to date this year. This is, we recently reached out to a whole bunch of different partners to let them know, folks that work with our homeless community or folks who just need assistance in a place to shower. So hoping that these numbers go up. But what we're also seeing is that folks are coming in for the shower program, and we're talking to them about Y membership, and they will often apply for financial assistance to be able to come and shower at other times of the day or use the amenities. Everybody loves a hot tub, especially in the winter time. So transferring them over to a membership. So I think it's serving both purposes, and it's doing really well. Buena Vida program. So just a reminder, this is a program for our Spanish speaking families to be led by one of our staff members who speaks Spanish fluently and get them connected, have a face and someone who is familiar to them. We have currently served 14 families over the end of 2022 and then this first quarter. They participate in a session of swim lessons, a session of culinary arts and visual arts, and then a physical activity class. So these families have since become members, and we are in the process of getting new families part. And we're really committed to getting a family together and then them sticking together for the 12 weeks so that they have their community. And then every other month we have potlucks. And those are the best potlucks to come because there's no store-bought food coming to those. Good stuff. Good stuff. And then the Bill Heath Sports Complex. So helping to manage that space and get reservations. We actually have gotten a few phone calls in the last week. So working with Derek on paperwork and rental agreements and all that stuff, but excited for school sports to end so that we can get that field rented out and used throughout the summer. That is that part of the services agreement. Okay, and the last part is the field project. So progress to date, we are doing all the things and all the paperwork to get us ready for SEPA, to figure out what's got to go down on our, we affectionately call it the marshmallow, that land that the Y is on. And so we're working on SEPA paperwork, BCRA in Tacoma, working closely with the Corliss Management Group on design, resources, etc. And I'll turn it over to Charlie, who can speak a little bit more towards what's happening.
So it is really good to be here. I don't want to miss an opportunity to say thank you. I know I point to our relationship with the city of Sumner as the best in our association. So we interact with a lot of cities, but you are a true partner. And I know that this Y would not have happened without you. And I look at Barb and Cindy, and I know they were waving the flag way before it was built. And it's a jewel, this YMCA, and it stands out in the country. People come to visit to see this beautiful YMCA in Sumner, Washington. So thank you for that. But it's really about the partnership. And so Jason and Andrea, we worked through this service agreement because they recognized, or we were disrupted during this pandemic. And we were all set to break ground and to build that field for the community as well as for the youth right in our YMCA. But things happened and we were disrupted. And so they worked with us, and I think we reached a good agreement. And Corliss is a big donor. And so they were a major donor. And they are also, as Jenna just pointed out, in the business of construction. And so they're working with us. And right now, like Jenna said, this is the infrastructure. So our hope is next year that we break ground. And we still have some fundraising to do, but we feel confident that we can get there. And having outdoor space now is more critical probably than ever, right? Youth, I just spoke about this on Saturday, but listening to a pediatrician in Olympia a few weeks ago and the crisis facing youth, anxiety, mental health like they've never seen. And they predict at the current rate that 1 out of 2 youth will be obese by 2050. That's staggering. So outdoor space and, the Gordon Y is one of the hubs for youth programming. There are thousands of kids. And so this is going to be great. We're determined. And I feel good about the progress we're making under the circumstances. Special thanks though to Jason and Andrea for really working with us and just trying to, be creative a little bit, because we did take a little bit of a hit during the COVID being closed, and then the mask mandate was tough. So we're back, we're coming back. You saw those numbers, Jenna and her team. I will say a bright spot, right? There's always silver linings. Getting to see Jenna become an exec and to show leadership and assemble a team that, in my opinion, is our best in the organization. It's a phenomenal team. Some really rising stars in our organization are now at the Gordon Y. So we're hopeful, and next time I come, well, I'd like to come before them, but we'll see a field and we'll all go out there and celebrate. So thank you for that. But thank you for being a great partner for our Y.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments for him? Or them? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's been since 2007 that we've had this partnership, so it's just gratifying to hear that there is progress on the fields, and then just the number of people that you're able to serve. And I do know that the staff is, every one of them is such high quality
Unbelievable.
people. So
Truly.
thank you for being in our community.
Wow.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, you brought us in, and it's been a great partnership.
Anybody else? Anybody online? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to be here, Rick.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Now we'll move on to safe parking car programs. We'll have Ryan Windish up to the helm.
Thank you, Mayor. As Ryan gets set up, we're also going to have Andrea here for questions, as well as Deputy Chief McCurdy, who has some experience with safe car parking programs.
Forget how to get set up. Is
Jeff will
on
share
it?
the screen.
Okay, perfect.
It's on the thumb drive, Jeff. Oh, no, it isn't. You're right. You gotta join the meeting.
I gotta join the meeting. Okay.
It's been 3 years. Actually, you know what, Mayor, if it's all right with you, we could just, well, Ryan joins me, we can do Mr. Barry's item. It's
Okay,
more concise and I know that's on the thumb drive.
all right.
I think he'd probably like to go home and watch the Kraken game.
Okay, we're gonna do the Rainier View Park playground replacement. Say that fast 3 times
Me? I don't know if I could.
first. So go ahead, Derek.
Ready to go? Okay. Thank you for having me tonight. Obviously, we're talking about Rainier View Park Playground Replacement. I'll say it the one time. Jeff, you can go to the next slide. In 2006, 2007. Oh, can I have it? There we go. In 2006, 2007. Are you muting me? Okay, no more echo. 2006, 2007, Rainier View Park was constructed. You can see the picture on the top left is the gravel and the asphalt is underneath the tile work now. And then finally in 2007, it was truly opened to the public. This is our newest park that's been completed. So 16, 17 years since our last new park. Several years ago, we started putting money away for playground replacement, much like our fleet replacement fund. So time is now up for Rainier View Park to get replaced. Not liking it. Okay. So current condition of the playground, you can see the slide there with the brown tube with the green in between. That's like a $4,000 or $5,000 replacement. One of them cracked. The net, another $4,000 or $5,000 replacement. You have to do that every few years. So as it gets older, these things start to get more brittle and break. We're 17 years right now. Loyalty Park, we were able to get about 20 years, if not more. Part of that has to deal with the shade and cover from the trees. This is out in the wide open. So we've gotten really good use out of it. And I'm proud of what the crew's been able to do. We've only had to replace one tile. And then you can kind of see underneath they call it the orbit spinner. There's one tile closest to the bottom of the screen that probably needs to be replaced soon. Anyways, what we're here tonight to talk about is the actual replacement. I've worked with the Forestry and Parks Commission, and we actually have a recommendation and a suggestion to utilize our park impact fees to expand and add inclusive features. This is something that you faced before with Loyalty Park. When we replaced that, we expanded it and did inclusive, and that allows you to actually use park impact fees. So impact fees can pay for added capacity. And there is, as you know, substantial growth out in that area, which will have a greater demand on this park's use. Some examples of what's going out there. This is the Windmill Gardens area. 162 units total between all of it, I believe. A little over $400,000 in park impact fees coming to the city for that. The next one is the Nemeth property, which has 105 units, so about $300,000 coming from that complex. So right now we have about $250,000 in our playground replacement budget, which allows you to swap out like for like. As you can see in the picture here, there's a little laser. I guess my laser will only show up on mine. Between the circle and the bean shaped is our walkway that's out there. The thought is to remove that completely. And what that allows us to do is expand the use area of the playground. There's fall height, fall zones that based off of how high you are up on a play equipment, how far of a space you need to be able to land safely. So the higher the toy, the bigger the space. Our current design really restricts what's allowed out there. So some options, this would be getting rid of that little walkway between the two. It allows for more play equipment, and this is actually inclusive here with ramping. We bumped it up to 400,000, and here's another example of what could be done. So in the end, it's all going to come down to dollars and cents, as you know. We have a $1.4 million budget at the end of 2022. About $1.2 million is earmarked, but about a million, actually a little more than that. We have about $1.2 million that actually is not going to be used though. $896,000 that was budgeted in 2023 was for Siebenthaler Parks Phase 1 and the Bennett property Phase 1. We weren't successful in RCO, so that money is not going to be spent. We also have $65,000 that's unbudgeted, but it is set aside for Siebenthaler's drainage issues. So what we're asking tonight is to be allowed to use about $200,000 of park impact fees to expand and make the playground inclusive. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Deputy Mayor.
Okay, so I might have missed a little bit, but inclusive meaning more handicap accessible? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, yeah, so ramping so that people that are mobility bound or not able to climb things as well can actually be ramped up to it, and then transition is what it comes down to.
The walkway is concrete between there?
Yep.
So you'll remove that?
Yep.
You said that none of the toys have fallen apart yet?
There have been some. I'd say probably $15,000 has been spent over the last 5 or 6 years for interviews. Is it not working again?
They're definitely at end of life.
Yeah, so are you planning, is the 200,000 making everything new and up to
Yes,
snuff?
completely
Okay,
new tile. We're gonna stick with tile. The wear and tear we've seen at Loyalty Park has been discouraging, to say it nicely. It's been very frustrating.
and what's
um,
used there?
What's used there?
Yeah.
It's the high use zones like around the at-grade merry-go-round where kids are leaning into it and doing the same circle and over
So
and over
that's
again.
tile there and,
That's tile here. The port in place is at Loyalty Park. And we've had some issues at Loyalty Park in all of the spinning movement areas. So tile work, you can see there, that tile has been there for about 15 years, 17
Okay.
years. So it's held up really well. So we're looking to go that route. If there is a high use tile, we can pop it out and replace it as opposed to the port in place, which is a little more complex. So
and the ramping is accessible for all kids to use
Yes.
and they can't
Yeah.
break it easily or anything like that. It's,
here we go. I think this one shows a better one. So if you look at the picture on the right, the blue, you can see the straight lines that get to those different transition zones.
Mhm.
And then once you get to the highest point, you should be able to transition up and use more of the play.
Anybody else? Councilmember Stewart.
Eric, I was trying to follow all the numbers that you
Okay.
you said. Can you go back? You said we didn't get the RCO grant for Bennett and Siebenthaler.
Correct.
So what's happening to those parks?
Nothing right now.
So they're on
It's-
hold.
Yes.
And so you're recommending transferring money that was budgeted over to Rainier View? Is that what you said?
You can look at it that way if you want. What I'm proposing is that we identify the development that's going on in that area. Their impact fee is going directly towards this because they're the ones that are the growth there is really going to impact this playground. The funds that were set aside for those was before these developments came in. So it's kind of whatever way you want to look at it.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
sort of.
Okay.
Mr. Stewart, if I could maybe walk through it, say it a little bit differently, and I think it might help. So right now in our park and trail impact fee, we have $1.4 million.
Okay.
Of that, council had already budgeted about $1 million towards Bennett, and we had earmarked another $65,000 for Siebenthaler, but we didn't get those. So we have still about we do have $1.4 million in that park impact fee. Mr. Berry is saying though, we also have all this development going on. And that is a kind of another revenue stream that's going to be coming into this fund. So on top of this 1.4, we're going to be getting new revenue that would more than cover the increase to this playground replacement expenditure. So you had already approved 250,000 out of our playground replacement fund. So what the ask is tonight is, are you willing to go up another $100,000 or $150,000 to expand it and make it an inclusive playground and make it even more of an amenity for that area of the city?
Okay, thank you. That helps me understand a little bit better. The concern I have is Bennett and Siebenthaler just are on the back burner now, and this money that we had earmarked for that is being used for Rainier View, so we're gonna have to dig in the well deeper to pay for the other two projects when they come back.
Not necessarily, because it's cash flow is what we need to really look at. Right now, we have 1.4 million. We have development that is in the permit pipeline that's going to replenish that. So
Like double it.
yeah, it'll actually almost double it, if all the development happens. That's not including the development that's happening in this part of the city either. So, so yes, temporarily it's gonna go down, but it's gonna, you know, the permit pipeline stays the way we believe it will, because we have permits that are, you know, in the process of being pulled. It's gonna be replenished, and we can then continue our efforts to seek grants for Bennett and Siebenthaler.
Perfect. Thank you.
And we do have the Parks and Trail Plan coming up. It'll be at the open house tomorrow. That'll help set priorities as well when we go work through that with the community and you guys. So
Thank you.
Anybody else?
So I just have a couple questions. Last week, I think, or week before, I learned about traffic impact fees. And so can I assume that park and trail impact fees are assessed for every new project, okay, great. Really, I was curious about, assuming this moves forward, will it be done at a time where it doesn't interrupt, when kids use the playground most often, like during the summer? What would be the timeline?
we could potentially wait until this fall. One thought is with the Rainier View covered court, or the park covered court is going to be out to bid any day. Mirroring that up with the construction of that, so we just close the entire park down while we're doing it. That's one approach we could do. We could jump on this in 3 or 4 weeks or whatever the delivery time is. That's fully up for discussion. We've reached out to 4 vendors from state contracts to give us proposals up to the $400,000 threshold. I've told them all we need to have it back for the Forestry and Parks Commission to review in May, and then probably narrow it down to 1 or 2, and then come to you all with a proposal. Last time we did Loyalty Park, we had the public share what color they wanted. And that was actually very, very popular. People really got into that. So yeah, the timing is completely up to whatever we want to do.
And how long would that take for the replacement to take?
I'd have to find out about lead time on the equipment coming to us. I'm guessing it's 6 weeks out. And then we'd be demoing it ourselves. One estimate I saw was $80,000 to remove, but that's also footings and repair and everything else. There are some things that we can take care of ahead of time. We can do some site prep work. That sidewalk we can handle in-house, but the installation of a playground this big is way above what our crews would really feel comfortable doing. We were able to do Siebenthaler in 2017, I think, ourselves, because it was much smaller and it wasn't a permanent fixture for surfacing.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
I think I have one more money question. It actually, aren't you just asking for a small amount? I mean, $200,000 and you, what
Yeah, it'd be,
is the 255 you're showing at the end of your subtraction there is what's available out of the budget we already have? right?
yeah, as if all of our grants were moving forward and everything was going to be spent.
So those large figures are on hold, waiting those grants.
Yeah, about 1.2 out of the 1.4 is on hold. And we already know that 900,000 of it's not moving forward with those grants.
So you're actually labeling that 255 available. I
Yep.
mean, and
Yep.
we would be taking the 200 out of the available.
Yep.
Well,
150.
why is it
150,
150?
150, because you already have 250 in your replacement program. So 400 is what we're asking, so, but 250 is from the replacement.
So what's that 200 there?
I'm asking for about 200.
He's
Just so
asking-
that if, everything that goes into it.
Okay,
We've got
You
to
just upped our budget.
There's padding.
okay.
So
come back twice.
we're looking at multiple pots of money here, but at the end of the day, we've asked for proposals up to that $400,000 budget, and we have 250,000 in our replacement program. So we're asking for the delta to come out of the park impact fees.
Well, I'm truly in favor of this, so thank you.
Councilmember Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also in favor. I like the idea of revamping the park and adding the inclusivity. Especially like the idea of if it's already going to be under construction for the covered the covered portion, then tying that together, I think makes perfect sense to me when that comes about. Plus, as far as the use of the money with, like was mentioned, there's a lot more coming from all the development that's coming through that area, and it's going to replenish quickly. So we can kind of get ahead of it a little bit here.
All right, anybody else want to weigh in? Sounds good. Sounds good.
So next steps, Mr. Barry will continue to work through the design of it, and then Cassandra will prepare a budget amendment. And it'll be back before you for the budget amendment as well as the appropriation, because it's going to be over the $300,000 staff limit.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
This will be fun.
All right, let's go back to safe parking car programs. Windish.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. Let me share my screen and remember how to do this. Dun, dun, dun. Hopefully, what I don't remember is how I can see my notes and share my screen. Remember how to do that. Yeah. You can. Great. Someone else. Here we go. All right.
Fire chief did it with no notes.
I can do this. First thing I want to point out is my illustration has RVs in it, and we are not proposing to do RV parking.
I saw that,
I've
baby. Yeah.
I've since had some conversations and been trying to get up to speed on safe car parking. And RVs are a completely different animal, if you will, than car parking. So tonight's objectives are to present some background on safe car parking programs, kind of how we even got to having this conversation. A little bit of an update on what the state law allows us to do and not do, the pros and cons of safe parking programs, and then I have a few options for the council to consider. And then hopefully by the end of this meeting, we've got some council direction on whether or not we want to move forward on any of those alternatives. And I do want to point out that Mr. McCurdy is here and Andrea to help out with questions that I can't answer. So we'll see how this goes. So what is a safe car parking program? State law allows for religious organizations to set up overnight parking of vehicles for homeless individuals and families. And it's really intended to be a safe place where they can park, offers some limited facilities like restrooms and services on the property. And these, you may have seen the recent article in the News Tribune regarding the city of Tacoma just got started on a safe parking program at the Catholic Church in Tacoma. It's actually being run by the Catholic Community Services folks. And they have 20 sites available, 20 spaces available, and I think they've filled 2 here recently. Anyway, just letting you know, this is, we seem to be right on the curve here in terms of what's trending out there. So state law allows for religious organizations to host these. It is their option to also have other organizations be contracted to actually manage the parking if they so desire. Other cities have done safe parking programs and are doing them. Deputy Chief McCurdy's was on the front lines of doing some things in Covington with the church there. And I've spoken with folks from Kirkland and Bellevue regarding their programs. And I'll talk a little bit more in detail about those as we get into this. Just broke it. And why are we bringing this to you tonight? Well, last summer, a local church, the Faith Covenant Church on Washington Street, contacted the city, I think it got forwarded to me, asking about doing a safe car parking program. They're looking at 4 cars, provide portable restrooms, showers available. They're looking at a couple times a week, an outside area with covered area with a table, having a code of conduct that has limit, no weapons, no drugs, that sort of thing. And then they're talking about having it monitored with security cameras and but not staffed like around the clock. And the scale of this, 4 cars, is not unusual. 4 to 5 cars in a small church is not an unusual scale. Honestly, seemed pretty manageable to me. And as I already mentioned, who's responsible? So managing safe car parking programs would be the religious organization or managing agency that they would choose to have do that instead of them. And ultimately, the city does have legal authority to issue permits and some regulations, but I do want to point out that the state law is really clear on the intent. The intent is really to allow these to happen. And so they have limitations on, well, basically, if you're going to put anything above and beyond, it needs to really have a clear public and public health and safety aspect to it. In other words, the city can't require exorbitant fees or them to get any kind of liability insurance. They can require background checks for like sex offenders and that kind of thing. However, they do have the option to choose whether to allow registered sex offenders to use the site or not. Just letting you know, they do have that option. There are people living in cars in the city. They have, there's not quite as many right now, but in the summertime, you see kind of more folks coming in. So and I'll talk about the pros and cons in a second. One of the things to keep in mind is people are and have been living in their cars in the city already. What this does is gives them a safe place to stay that's managed in kind of in one place. So what are some of the pros and cons? So as I mentioned, one of the pros is it does provide some needed options for persons living in their vehicles. They're not parking illegally. In the conversations I've had with some of the cities that are operating these, what they said is folks living in their cars, often they've more in the immediate term become homeless, right? They haven't been on the street forever. They just had some kind of crisis. Rents skyrocketed, lost their job, fleeing a domestic situation, whatever. They end up, and the only option they have is to live in their car. So a lot of these people, the church told me that they're working. They actually just sleep in their car and then they go to work. They have kids go to school. And they're actively looking for the next step into permanent housing. They might be waiting for Section 8 list to shorten up so they can get in somewhere. They are, and part of the role of the church is to really actively connect them with services so that they're moving out of what is really a temporary situation. And I'll just quickly contrast that with RVs, where people living in an RV kind of look at that as their home on wheels. So they're not as interested in other options for housing. And then there's the logistics of a home on wheels that has heat, propane, and disposal waste and all that. So we're not talking about RVs here, but that's the reason most of these car parking programs that I've been looking at are doing cars and vehicles and not RVs. So the other pro is that there's management and oversight by the responsible party, which would be the church. There'd be restrooms, garbage collection. It's safe and predictable for residents. They don't have to move their vehicles very often. And what we're recommending is something that's managed by a religious organization. They take on the cost and the liability, and it's not funded by the city. Now, Bellevue is doing a pilot project. Clearly, Tacoma is doing a pilot project, and they're putting money into it, but we're not asking for that or recommending that at this point in time. Some of the drawbacks, neighborhood concerns around safety and security of their neighborhood. If you're kind of inviting what might be something that would be you may perceive as a resident as undesirable. You're inviting the homeless to the area. A lot of people might see that as undesirable. And then concerns about noise and aesthetics. So trash or I guess things late at night that might be loud. Jump to the next one. So some of the options and alternatives. One would be to go forward with a kind of a full-blown zoning code text amendment, go through that process to allow safe car parking programs as a temporary use in our code. The other would be to allow the mayor to enter into a memorandum of understanding more as a pilot project for a year. Gonna monitor this, see how it might go. And then the third option, and there's probably some option I didn't put up here, but the third option would be to just not allow car parking yet or at all ever in the city of Sumner. And I got these a little out of order, but what would be the requirements for a memorandum of understanding if that was the choice? It could contain requirements, and this is also in state law, that there be a neighborhood meeting prior to approval. The religious organization would be required to set that up and notify the city, and the city would get notice out as well. So anyway, there'd be a noticing of the neighborhood and opportunity to have kind of a meeting to talk about it and their concerns. They're required by state law to have sex offender background checks for anybody who's going to be staying there. And then you can put limits on how much parking of the parking lot, for example, that they could take up. Again, with the example that I'm bringing forward, the 4 parking spaces would be well under a 10% of the parking lot to be used. You require restrooms, either portable facilities or they have access to the building. Minimum parking spaces required per code for the church would need to be maintained. There could be weekly drive-by inspections. And then one of the big things is to have like a 24/7 contact phone number if there are problems. So that's a phone number that police could call to get a hold of somebody, or I believe the neighbors might even be able to have that number, but it would be, if there's a problem, there's somebody who's going to answer and address it. A code of conduct would be a written code of conduct that those using the facility would need to agree to and sign. And then, like I said earlier, the ability to prohibit RVs and only allow cars and trucks. And the other thing that the church would have the option to do, so long as they don't have any government funding, would be to limit the use. It could be women and women with children, for example. Some of the churches do that. Some of them kind of flip that around and understand that individuals, men and even couples can have a harder time finding resources. So some churches choose to serve that demographic. So there's options there as well in terms of which demographic they may choose to serve. So that's so staff's recommendation is, I love pilot projects. So I'm thinking a memorandum of understanding with a kind of a pilot project approach might be the best way to go. Give this a chance to see how it goes, and if it's not going great, we don't continue it. With that, I want to open it up for questions or any comments from Mr. McCurdy or Ms. Marquez.
There's kind of a lot to unpack there, so I'm gonna bounce around a little bit, but first we'll start with a bit of a history lesson. The city of Sumner has had, under its temporary use code, homeless encampment regulations for years. Why that is important is because in June of 2020, the state brought down this new law that Ryan is referencing, which limited city and county's ability to regulate these types of uses. But we are grandfathered. Our code is more restrictive than the current state law, and that's okay. Even if we amend it in the future, that's okay. But it currently prohibits outright these safe parking lots because it says no person in a homeless encampment may sleep in their vehicle. Another thing I wanted to mention, so that is all to say that if we choose to modify our code to allow safe parking lots, we will not disrupt the conditions that we place on homeless encampments. We're safe to amend that code. Let's see, Ryan, go ahead.
You confused me. It almost seemed like you said, okay, the code would still stay in place, what we put in. Only the pilot program would not disrupt it, but if we change the code, it would disrupt that, right?
No.
It would not. Okay, explain that to me, why that would not disrupt the code.
We are grandfathered because our laws existed prior to June of 2020. So if we amend our code to also permit safe parking lots, the conditions that we've placed on homeless encampments can stay.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
It'd be two separate temporary
Okay,
uses.
thank you for.
You're welcome.
That really.
An MOU or a pilot project that doesn't impact our code at all would be completely separate as well.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
Councilmember Reed has a question.
I have a few, actually. Thank you. First of all, and I think Andrea explained a good portion of this, because I was going to ask the difference between our existing guidelines and the new guidelines with this. Off the top, I struggle with this because I've seen attempts in so many variations like this, and I don't know that I've seen a successful one. That's a challenge that I see. But I also, another thing that comes to mind is if somebody has declared one of these vehicles as their residence and they're not following what the church has put out as the guideline, does the church have any recourse to move them out? Similar to what other cities have run into, to where once it's in place, it doesn't go, it's very difficult to make any changes to it. So that would be one of my questions. The other would circle around the reason we put the background checks and the security measures into the homeless encampments to begin with, and why we would loosen that for this scenario as far as doing the background checks and or the security reasons. That would be another one. And also the fact that it's right between two schools also comes up, but I'm not sure how clear. I've got so many other questions to go with it, but those would be my two main ones is why would we be changing what we already have established for guidelines? And two is there any recourse for the church in the event that one of the attendees or residents are not upholding their end of the bargain?
So I can address the church will have a code of conduct and you need to follow that or you're not allowed to stay there. I mean, that's kind of the crux of that is if you're violating that, they have the authority to ask you to leave.
Well, and that's the big question. They can ask, but do they have the authority to actually make somebody move if that's
Yes.
been declared their residence?
They can require them to leave.
Okay.
Councilmember Reed, I think what you're recalling, and a lot of us lived through the last several years, was the prohibition on evictions really halted a lot of city's ability to remove tents and vehicles that somebody claims is their primary residence.
Yes.
Those eviction prohibitions are since lifted. And so, yes, under the terms of this MOU, a private church would have the ability to trespass someone or terminate their agreement with the resident.
Okay, that was a big, because I know some jurisdictions still have some of those requirements or some of the, I don't know if they've been locally adopted or if it was because the state lifted, but they still have some areas where it's difficult to move somebody on if they're not upholding their end. And then the other one goes back to the comparison of the requirements that we already have in place for the background portions for the camps versus what would be required here. Because it seems like if we're doing a sexual predator background check, doesn't the existing homeless one have a check for warrants as well?
Yeah, it does.
It does. I'll do my best to answer that. The restrictions we already have in our code would not apply to safe parking lots. If we codified safe parking lots, we would have to comply with the state law when it comes to that use only. There's civil immunity that was brought down from the top in the 2020 law. So it protects cities against crime or damage that occurs by way of allowing these safe parking lots. But you're right, we can't require insurance. We can't require indemnification. We can require criminal background checks or sex offender checks, but not criminal background checks. So there is some limit on what the city could do if we decided to allow these through code.
Okay, so the new law does prohibit the active warrant. I mean, whether or not somebody has a history is one thing, whether or not they have an active warrant would be my concern. That versus, well, and obviously the sex offender one, and the fact that it's right between two schools, and having some checks and measures to make sure that the surrounding community has at least a feeling of security for the way that it's implemented.
Okay, Councilmember Pacheco first.
So, would this be open 24 hours a day? Or would there be restrictions, you know, like sun up to sundown or sundown to sun up?
I think the facilities that I've interviewed folks on are open 24 hours a day.
If I can shed a little light too on, so when I worked in Covington, I think this is about 2016 or 17. We had a St. John the Baptist Catholic Church in Covington that had some members of the congregation that were very motivated to start a safe car parking program. That area was a little bit unique because it's pretty it's pretty kind of on the edge of town. It's in a suburban area surrounded by kind of higher end homes. Across the street was the brand new flagship Covington Elementary School that was scheduled to open the same month that they were going to start the safe car parking program. So there was a lot of concern from the neighborhood, concern from the school district. There was concern from leadership in the church where they were having trouble managing the members of the congregation that wanted to start this program. And so we kind of came in as the city and guided them toward this path of, it was the first one in the state of Washington where there was a voluntary MOU that was established between the city and the church. And kind of what that did is it gave all the stakeholders the opportunity to come in and kind of state their concerns and their motivations, and then come to some agreements about what this would look like in a way that would be comfortable for everyone. The church actually contracted with Catholic Community Services to do all of their screening and vetting. We had agreements with the police department because the police department can't just go in there and patrol and keep people out, can't just go in there to look for crime necessarily. The whole purpose of having them there is that they're not going to be harassed or intimidated by the police. So we had a lot of things put into place. They had about 20 members of the congregation that would volunteer and take turns doing nightly checks. And when they would do those nightly checks, they would be offering services and resources. They would issue, the Catholic Community Services, when they would vet people, would issue that person a card, and that person had to have that card in their dashboard, and they would go through and look for people that were out of violation, and then they would call the police to come in, and then we could help remove people who were unwanted. And there was a big to-do, a lot of work that went into this. What it ended up looking like, and I was really glad that we had done the MOU, because what it did is it gave the people who wanted to go out there and serve people in need the opportunity to do so. But then it gave the church, the city, and all the other stakeholders, the neighbors, an opportunity to weigh in with what their concerns were. And the MOU became very restrictive. Originally, it was 4 parking spaces, eventually expanded to 16, but they never had more than 3 cars parked there. The restriction was that they had to leave at 8 a.m. and they couldn't come back till 8 p.m. And that one of the things that did is it prevented them from being stuck with a broken down car in their parking lot that was never going to move again, that they then would have to pay a tow company to come in and remove. And it also motivated the people who were staying there to really use the space for what it was intended to be, which was kind of a temporary place to park while they kind of got their feet back from under them and everything else. Catholic Community Service focused primarily on elderly women, many of which had a DV past and were fleeing from DV relationships or had severe medical problems. So when we typically had 2 to 4 cars parked in there, most of them were women in their 70s and 80s who were homeless because they had significant medical debt and could no longer, they weren't comfortable in communal housing that was typical for emergency sheltering. So this gave them that opportunity to live in their car. Most of them were working during the day, and then they could use their benefits to save up enough money. And then we had some other sources through Salvation Army and so forth to get them into permanent housing eventually. So it really, what it did is it created a safe space where the church was able to serve members of the community in need, but they did so in a way that the church had some hammer behind them to say, like, I'm sorry, we can't do too much. We're not going to overextend. We're not going to put ourselves in over our head. And again, with everybody involved, it made people feel much more comfortable. It was interesting because the neighborhood surrounding the church and the school started out being very resistant to it, but eventually when it started going, when they saw the people who were being served there, they actually became kind of wrapped around these people and really offered them a lot of support. When it would get cold, people in the neighborhood behind them that were outraged that they were going to be there ended up bringing them clothing and blankets and so on. So it ended up being a really good program. It's still going on today. The partnership with Catholic Community Services, Catholic Community Services is a pretty robust organization that has a lot of machinery behind it that was able to do a really good job, not just of the screening process, but also really looking a little deeper than that and trying to find people who are really a good fit for that community. There were a lot of people who were kind of hopping from place like this around. They had no connection to the city of Covington, had no opportunities for employment in that area, and they were gonna basically take a lot of the church resources and kind of deplete those until they moved on to their next place. And Catholic Community Services was able to help avoid that by really finding people that were a better fit. So, I mean, I do think there is a way to do it. It does involve that everybody engaged do so voluntarily, and there has to be a lot of kind of discussion and collaboration behind it to make sure that everybody's in it for the right reasons. But I mean, I do think it was a successful program in a lot of ways. There were a lot of people who would literally have nowhere else to go. I mean, typically people living in their cars are ones who are not, it's not appropriate for them to go to other housings available, and they don't qualify for more supportive housing, or they don't qualify for, don't have enough income or anything else like that to move into their own place. The other thing is pets. A lot of them had pets, and most of the places where they could live otherwise wouldn't allow pets, so they wanted to keep their pets, and they could do so in their car. So again, I think this could be an opportunity to do something good, but I do think that having the right people communicating with the church to make sure they understand the risk to the church. There was a lot of controversy within the church when they implemented it, and they lost a lot of members of the church because of it, who just did not think it was appropriate to do that. And I think the church should go in there with eyes open to realize that this is a big undertaking. You know, a once a week drive through is not adequate. It needs to be something that's active and ongoing, and that people need to be engaged. We, the police department, provided training about personal safety and situational awareness on a quarterly basis to all the volunteers that participated. And I think that was a huge part of really not just equipping people to keep themselves safe, but to also know how to connect with people who are in crisis to provide resources and such. Because I don't think this ends up looking anything like most of the people who ask for it really think it's going to look. I think it ends up, for us in Covington, it ended up looking like something that was, you know, it was a beautiful opportunity to provide, you know, support to people who had nothing else, no other opportunity. So again, I think it served that need of giving the people who wanted to do it that opportunity, but also put appropriate restrictions on it, given where it was and what resources were available in that community, so that it didn't become a burden on other resources. We did end up having, we didn't have a lot of police calls there. Most of the police calls we got were from people staying there because they would call in about, you know, seeing car prowlers going into the neighborhood, you know, the neighborhood that was afraid to have them there. They ended up being like kind of, you know, nighttime watchdogs sometimes, or they'd call in because somebody would show up that wasn't supposed to be there, that hadn't been vetted. But we ended up having a lot of medical calls. The fire department actually saw a significant increase in calls because most of the people living there had a lot of medical needs. But I'm trying to think if there's anything else significant about it. I had sent the MOU that we had used, and it's changed over time. There's been a lot as it's gone on. The church has really developed a good system for maintaining it and still staying engaged with the neighbors to address their concerns at ease and everything. They did have restrictions when I was still there. I don't know if it changed, where you could have no felony convictions, no active warrants, and no sex offense convictions or that would require registration. But again, because it was voluntary, you can put a lot of things in place that you could not really require in a law based on the way the statutes are. But I think it ended up being a really good fit for that church and that community. And it's not that different in Covington than it is here. I think there are more services here in Sumner than there were in Covington. You know, food bank and so on, that's not too far away from where they're proposing, but I think you also can't start something like this without having those groups that are going to be impacted and engaged in it, which I think is the good opportunity with a voluntary MOU, where you can really get everybody around the table talking about it, giving their input and coming up with some reasonable expectations.
So do you think a year? I mean, to me, a year sounds like a long time.
So the one in
Right.
Covington was a perpetual one that they would renew every year, and
Uh-huh.
it's still, I don't know if you have the most recent version. I believe it's still very similar to the one that we initiated in 2017, and
Yeah.
they've just continued to do it as a MOU because it fits well, and the city was reluctant to change any of their laws to accommodate it because of some other concerns.
Well, and on that point,
the proposal is a year, but state law requires no less than 6 months. So it could be 6 months, review it. Is it working? Is it not? 6 more months, renew it.
Because
So
for-
just know that state law limits you to no less than 6 months.
Because for me, I think, I mean, a year sounds like a long time if you're just trying a project. And I think 6 months, especially like the next 6 months or, more daylight and better weather and all that. And then if it really is working, and then like at Faith Covenant, they have 2 parking lots. So which would it be, the one by the high school or the other one on the,
Yeah.
near,
I don't know what they're thinking.
but they're,
I know where I'd put it, but I'm not sure how they're building it.
yeah. And then what kind of support do they have? Like they, is there another agency that would be helping them?
Mhm. Good questions. Yeah, and I would definitely be setting up a meeting with them and Deputy McCurdy, Andrea Marquez, that she was going to attend and kind of, sit down and go over, here's what they did in Covington. And
Yeah.
Deputy
But
McCurdy's
it's wonderful that we
experience.
have your experience so that you're speaking, it's not like,
Well, I think
It's
the thing that
good idea.
oftentimes people don't take into account that try to open these is that really they're responsible for the safety of the people participating.
mhm,
And the more restrictions they put on place and the people who are staying there, the safer those people are gonna be as well. And I think that initially, when we started this undertaking in Covington, the concern was about protecting the community from these people that were staying there. And what we found out is that we needed to protect people staying there from everyone else. And I think the church realized that all of these things that seemed restrictive were actually making sure that they were serving the people who really fit the group that they wanted to serve. And, one of the things that we didn't explore that we had talked about early on that I think might be a good fit for somewhere like Sumner is to partner with an organization like a domestic violence organization or somewhere else that can find clientele to stay there that are kind of within a group that church is really ready to serve and maybe has resources to help. Because I think when there's in our society now, I think when we hear the word homeless, we paint them with a picture and make certain assumptions about who they are and why they're there and what their needs are. But I think within that umbrella of homelessness, there's 1,000 different categories of people with very different sets of needs. And I think if that church were to figure out what services they have and what needs those would fill, then they can focus on the people who are going to benefit most from it.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. Chief, thanks for explaining everything from your experience. At first glance, I didn't like the idea, but then the more the discussion came around to, this is a good deal for the church members to be able to serve other people than themselves. I think that's really good. The concern I have is, well, I got a couple of questions. I really like what Councilmember Botetto mentioned about 6 months in a review and renewing it. My concern would be, as you mentioned, that it started somewhere, whether it was Bellevue or Covington, they started with 4 and then they went to 14 or 16 or whatever, that the number grew, that we would still maintain control over how much that grew.
Yeah.
Then, Ryan, in your first bullet under pros, you said provides needed option for those persons living in their vehicles who are now parking illegally.
Mhm.
Do we currently enforce illegally parked vehicles?
Yes and no. So, I don't know if it. Yeah, so the issue is gonna be, is it on private property or is it on public roadways? One of the things, but.
The police department's ability to enforce illegal parking overnight or people who claim to be residing in their cars got a lot more difficult a couple of years ago when the state Supreme Court said somebody who claims that their vehicle is their residence has a homestead right. So yes, you can tow their car if it's parked illegally, but then you may have to pay for it. Anyways, it got a lot more difficult for local police departments to enforce illegal parking. But to their point, people are already living in their vehicles. And right now they're doing it on public streets. And so our police department can either move them around the city constantly, or there can be a centralized location and opportunity for them to actually sleep in their vehicle at night without the risk of being towed or moved along.
I'll just add to that. And one of the disadvantages to having them park on streets or near our parks is, they do create, garbage and they need restroom access. And those are all things that, unless they have access to those, like in safe parking, they will find other ways of disposing of their trash or their human waste. And we do see that along some of our public parking up in our industrial area, as well as even around some of our parks out on the east side of town, by our shops especially. So pros and cons to all of this. I want to kind of put some borders on what we would be proposing to you if council is interested. We'd be coming back to council with a resolution. And in that resolution, it would authorize the mayor and city administrator to enter into an MOU with this church for the purposes of creating a safe parking. And that resolution would also include some very basics of what the MOU must include at a minimum, right? We wouldn't want to list everything because, as Deputy Chief McCurdy said, we got to get the stakeholders involved and come up with what exactly the framework of that MOU is. But if there's some non-negotiables that council would like to see, we'll make sure those are included in the resolution for your consideration. I'll tell you, my biggest concern, and this is why we're here tonight, is I wanted you all to weigh in on this before we invest a lot of staff time putting it together. So that's why we're doing it kind of in this order rather than just bringing you a resolution and kind of putting everything together.
I'm
Thank
going
you.
to go to council member or deputy mayor.
I guess he wasn't done.
Joe, you weren't done? Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, finish.
This is a little bit off topic real quick. I've noticed a lot of people parking in the Bill Heath Sports Complex parking lot, and I think they live right across the street. Is there a way we can ticket them for not let them get free parking?
We can't issue
I
citation.
know that's
and-
an
and
issue
parking, yeah.
off the subject.
That's a public parking lot. So we're, they'd have to be there more than 24 hours before we would even consider taking any enforcement action.
Okay, sorry to
Yeah, so okay. Yes, speak for a minute.
Okay, thank you. Deputy mayor.
I'm open to the prospects of this happening. If the city can, I'm in favor of what Barb proposed of doing the 6-month. And then you would talk about expanding it. What I wanted, there's a couple things I want to get straight in my mind. And one of them is, how far is the church on developing their vision and their program? Because it's pretty essential that they have guidelines and committed people to make this happen. And I know we have to go first, but in a way, I'd like to see what they're going to do. But as long as we have reassurance that the city will work with them and help them understand what they're getting into. And the other thing I think Ms. Potato brought up also is, maybe it's not a thing for them to manage on their own. The ones that I've heard people talk about, they do hook into what you called Catholic services, or there's other programs in Tacoma. I don't know the exact name. So that they're not trying to learn how to manage this. They're hooked up with people who know how to vet the clients that are going to be there and some of the issues so the issues will be brought forward to them before they get into it. And then the other thing is I think, we all don't like seeing people trying to park on the sides of the street and all that, but all these things, but we're not going to eliminate those problems. All we're going to be doing is allowing them to help a small number of people. And as a church, that's mostly what their vision is to do. So I would like to give them the opportunity if we can figure out a way to do it in a safe manner, and that the people that live by it and the other parties concerned, weigh in and are in favor of it. So, but does the city think they can help them through this process, or?
Well, we have not had a sit down with the church and really talk about what their vision is or kind of how far down the road they are on this. I don't believe it. Mr.
Yeah,
Deputy Chief McCurdy.
I've had a couple meetings with them. It seemed to me like it was more of an idea and it seemed like there was people who were just gonna do it. But when the ideas were brought up about risk and data collection and this idea that something like this could do more harm than good if it's not done properly, I think they started to realize, originally they were gonna purchase a couple of RVs and park them on their lot and let people live in them. So we, had some discussions about the concerns with that. So I don't know how far they've come since then. I think my last meeting with them was about 6 months ago. But I think that they, when we started talking about these other perspectives, I think they were interested in making it a little more specific and targeted, but
Did it seem like it was that the church, was it a group of people or was the church behind them on using, well, would they be using some of their facilities too?
it was my impression that I was talking to members of the congregation who wanted to start this, and that church leadership had given them some support for the idea, but it didn't seem like they had really worked out any details.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And that was 6 months ago or so. I'm not sure how far they've come.
Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. A couple of my follow-up questions. I think
Just a
one
minute.
is,
Mr. Reed, just a minute.
sure.
So I just wanted to follow on that. Well, first of all, it's been since like last summer since we were approached by the church, and it's just honestly, given staff workload, it hadn't risen to, a priority, but now we're talking about it finally. And the last I heard, it was really about, like I had put on the one slide, 4-car parking spaces, offering restrooms and showers and being willing to manage it. But there needs to be more follow-on conversations to make sure they fully understand kind of what they're getting into, so to speak, in order for them to, of course, make decisions that they need to make and understand if they want to move forward with it or not.
But do we have to pass this before they can then begin their solid process, or can we allow them to begin a good, I mean, there's a lot of work in putting this
Yeah.
thing
No,
together.
I think the next step, if the council is willing to entertain the idea of a memorandum of understanding, the next step would be go back to the church and say, okay, let's talk about this, because there's a lot to it. And before we move forward and take something to council to have them approve, we need to basically make sure they're on board and understand what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
And to be clear, we've been putting the church off until we could have this conversation. So they come back every few months, ask
They
us,
do.
and we say, we're getting to it, and now we're here, so.
Well, and the situation that we have grown more and more fearful of, currently we prohibit this type of use. Our code is silent on it, rather. And so our concern was that they would start this program and the city would have lost the ability to put some conditions and restraints on this type of use. So we want to be responsive to the church and make sure we're part of the discussion rather than being reactive to a program they just start in the dark of night and we have less control over.
All right. Councilmember Reed, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. And I know, Jason, you'd mentioned that you're looking for direction. I can't say I'm a firm no, but I have a lot of concerns. One of my big questions would be, I've seen that some jurisdictions throughout not necessarily in Washington, but throughout the country have been able to require a active participation in social programs or programs that would help lift these people out of their situation, and that they had to be actively pursuing that to be part of the program. I don't know if that's something that's included in Washington's version. And I think another one that just keeps coming to mind is what are the metrics of success for it? Well, how do you measure whether it was successful or not? Is that there aren't problems caused, or is it because the people have found permanent housing? I'd like to see a clear set of those as well. So in 6 months, you can come back and say, these objectives have been met, therefore it's been worth the time and investment and mitigated the risks that come with it. Those are some of the things floating in my mind, but again, I'm definitely not decided. But like I said, I'm not a hard no, but I'm also very cautious.
All right, Councilmember Cole.
I,
There was a question in there, though, the one about being able to, for people to be able to require the active participation in social programs.
The answer is no. Washington state law does not require that.
But does it allow the local jurisdiction to establish that?
Not if we codify it in our code, we would be restrained to what the state law allows. MOUs are different. MOUs provide a lot more flexibility, particularly under a pilot program.
Is there anything that would stop this organization, for example, from starting under an MOU and another one to start it without one and just do it on their own?
Well, the answer is if somebody has a contract with the city that allows the use, it wouldn't violate our code. If
Okay.
somebody just started a safe parking program, which we currently prohibit, then we'd have to address it through our code enforcement.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Councilmember Cole is going to go next.
Thank you. So I struggled with this when I read it, initially. And I had to think about it for a little bit, to actually just come to terms with, whether or not I would support it. And so I actually did get there, and mostly because, it's an opportunity to help people. And it seems like it's a small number of cars, that would be, assuming that it was state, a small number of cars. I think that it would be, that it's a beautiful thing that this church wants to do to help people. And if I myself were parked on the street and needed some kind of service, that would, just be something that I'd be really grateful for, the opportunity to be there, to feel safe, as opposed to being parked anywhere and, and having, not having any place to go every night. That'd be even more scarier than even having to live in my car. So I would actually support the MOU, but like Councilmember Potato mentioned, a year seems to be a long time. And so I would support, I guess I'd advocate for like maybe 6 months as opposed to a year. With the caveat that, there be a restriction to a smaller number of cars, like as is written in the presentation. So anyway, I think it'd be a good thing and I'd support it.
Councilmember Newman.
Thank you. I think I mostly kind of want to echo some of Councilmember Cole's thoughts on this. So I do agree in terms of a 6-month pilot, but I think then it should also allow for the opportunity to extend for a year if the city hasn't been too negatively impacted by it. So in other words, any church organization getting started, sort of that 6-month trial run for them to really like understand everything that's involved. And if they've successfully maintained the program, then I'll allow them to extend a year at a time rather than go through even the administrative burden on our end of having to renew every 6 months. So, and then I think as long as like the safety issues and considerations are maintained or considered in the MOU, as well as the physical upkeep of the area. So public safety, I think I don't want to get more burdensome than that, like in terms of requirements that they participate in some social program. It's not our program, it's church volunteers, and the church running it. So I'm not going to prescribe for them something that they want to do. It'd be one thing if it was our staff, running it and deciding, but like life's hard enough if you're living in your car. It's like And also, I'm not gonna I don't want to make the church volunteers have to do the work of checking to make sure that there are, like, how are you gonna determine which social programs like meet the qualifications? I just don't want to get into micromanaging this. And again, and to Councilmember Cole's point, it sounds like they're starting out so small that impact to the city, anything like it should probably, I don't know that if we weren't having this conversation that we would ever notice if they were doing it. Anyway, so anyway, that's where I am on it. Yes, I support moving forward with some kind of arrangement.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? All right, I think we got it.
So what I'm hearing is an overall desire to at least consider a resolution that would authorize a pilot program, 6-month review of that pilot program, and then extensions from that point forward. Next steps for us is we'll re-engage with the church and make sure they're still interested to have those early conversations. And if they are, we'll prepare a resolution, bring it back to a study session for review, and then ask you to vote on it after that. Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. Good work, guys. Almost. Okay, city administrator report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just 2 things tonight. First off, you should have all received an email from our IT department regarding the change to our phone system here at City Hall. This is something that we've been working on for about 6 months now, and we're in the final stages of it. And one of the final stages was to roll all of your phone numbers over to Microsoft Teams. The advantage that you will see is if you get a voicemail, it will appear in your email inbox. It'll transcribe itself, but it'll also be an audio file that you could open up and listen to. If you want to call out, you can always visit the council office, and there's a generic phone number and phone in there that you can use to call any constituent back if you'd like. The second thing, yesterday was the last day of the legislative session. You may have heard that the state legislature did not pass a fix to the drug possession laws, or commonly referred to as the Blake fix. We are monitoring that with AWC. They may do a special session. Mayor Hayden and I were both in contact with some of our legislators over the weekend as they were nearing that for a vote. Well, at the same time, even if they don't call a special session, staff has been working to draft an ordinance that would make drug possession illegal in the city of Sumner. That's something that we actually had on the books prior to the Blake decision that was, preempted. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Preempted when the court issued the Blake decision. So whether the legislature acts or we bring you an ordinance, there will be something in place come July 1st, provided you vote for it if when we bring it to you. Any questions?
Any questions? No? You're good?
Thank you.
Okay, any council meeting changes or any problems? Seeing none there. Committee meeting issues, anybody? No, seeing none. We have no executive session. And so I adjourn this meeting at 7:53.